Hello, everyone. I hope we are live. Okay, I think we are live already. Hey there. Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome. We have, all right, several people here already. Hello. We are here with our speakers. Nice to have you all here. I'm here with Warren from Flow Career. I'm from Flow Career as well. Nice to meet you all. I'm Simi. And we have our great speakers today, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah is a PhD and a global economist at Radency. Also, we have Andy Spence, who is a workforce futurist and a global speaker, and Jen Taylor from Deal, who is a tech partnership manager. So, hi, guys. I think we will have CEO here soon, too. And yeah, how are you doing today?
Great.
Really good. Great to be here.
Things are going good on my end. Thanks for having us.
Cool.
My pleasure. Yeah, so let's get started by talking about let me just collapse here. This will come soon, not right now. Today, we have a really nice conversation about the gig economy, the freelancing world which all of us are part of, right? And it is increasing, growing. Even people in companies who never thought about it are very traditional, are all thinking about it or already seeing the difference and seeing that they need to keep up with the new rules and everything that has changed, especially during the pandemic period, but not only because of it, right? And we want to check your thoughts on that. You have very different perspectives from different places and different backgrounds, but I'm sure that we will find several common opinions, right?
Great. Here's Mahul. Awesome.
Hey, Mahul.
Okay. So thanks, Simi. Well, I guess Mahul was here for a minute. Anyhow, I'll kind of kick things off. Thank you, everyone, for joining. As you know, the gig economy and freelancer world, is very important to Flow Career from a number of different aspects. One, we work with over 4,000 global freelancers as interviewers for us that help Flow Career help our clients to hire the best talent, particularly in the software technology world. In addition to that, many of our clients certainly are hiring freelancers. So as a result, we wanted to talk about this topic since it's so prevalent in the news today and so many different trends and changes. And to do that, we've got a great panel of experts, as Simi just mentioned and introduced to. We have an economist, we have a practitioner, and we have a futurist. So with that, I'd like to just make a brief introductions and then ask everyone to introduce themselves. Dr. Sarah Ali is global economist at Radency, which is a global talent acquisition software and professional services organization. Dan Taylor, our practitioner, is the tech partnerships manager at Deal. And as you know, Deal is building a global end-to-end HR platform for global teams to be able to hire, manage compliantly employees, whether they're freelancers or permanent. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Andy Spence is a renowned workforce futurist who really focuses on exploring the intersection of technology, work, and society. So with that, why don't I just ask each one to just say a couple words, starting with Sarah, and then we'll go around.
Hi, everybody. It's actually Sarah. Dr. Sarah Ali, a global economist at Radency. Nice to meet all of you. Been at Radency for about a year and a month, but my background, 16 years applied economics. But at Radency, working a lot with the Fortune 100 companies, advising them on kind of the recruiting, retention landscape. And again, pleasure to meet all of you and happy to be on the panel today.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Dan?
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm Dan Taylor. My home is in Utah. I work with Deal. As you stated, Deal is helping people hire and build global teams. And there's a lot of different options with Deal, hiring full-time employees, hiring as contractors, hiring people on a basis to accomplish a certain goal, do things for your company. And the whole idea is to streamline this process, make it very easy, make it accessible to everyone so you can find the best talent, regardless of how your business operates and where your business operates, and remove barriers for employees. So very excited to be here. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for coming. And Andy, last but not least.
Hi, everybody. Really looking forward to the conversation today. I publish Workforce Futurist newsletter, and my background is in designing organizations with transformation for global organizations. And the last few years have been researching the future of work trends. So that's my obsession, you could say. Very cool.
Thanks. And Mehul, would you like to just say a few words to welcome everyone?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Apologies for a little, tech glitch that I was, just experiencing. So, but yeah, I'm here now. Welcome aboard, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. This subject is very close to my heart, and very passionate about how do we make sure that we expand the horizon in terms of using more and more gig workers to solve some real world problems, right? So really looking forward to hear what you all have to say, and welcome aboard, everyone.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll start with our first question for our panelists, and that is, according to a recent survey you may have seen that was conducted by Fiverr in partnership with Censuswide, as well as a similar one that came out earlier in the year or late last year from Upwork, 73% of U.S. workers plan to freelance in 2023. What do we feel is driving this trend? Sarah, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll share the link for everyone.
Sure. I have three answers to that one, but I'll start with the first one if it helps. I think the first issue is like a tight labor market right now in the US. If you look at the ratio that looks at job tightness, the number of job openings to job seekers right now, it's like 2 jobs for every unemployed person. And then pre-pandemic, like 15 months prior, it was about 1.1 job for every job seeker. And so there's the labor market tightness issue. And then the second factor is the wage growth. People are jumping around. There's data from the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank that shows job switchers make more than job stayers, right? And so if you're looking at saying, right, there's these people are making decisions at the margin, they're looking at benefits and costs. And so you're looking at that, from that perspective. And then the third, factor that I thought about, would be, I think, autonomy and flexibility. So people want to have some type of independence. A lot of job seekers that we talk to are considering those, right, as factors that are driving their job search. And, there's also issues, right, with not just collecting a paycheck, it's having the autonomy, but that respect, right? And that mentorship in your job. 8 to 5 isn't for everybody. And so I think those are kind of the 3 factors at a high level, in my opinion, that are driving freelancing.
Very cool. Interesting. And Andy, what do you think?
Well, first of all, it used to be 9 to 5, Sarah, but it's been extended now to 8 to 5. I think that says it all, really. We're all working longer. I would concur with those. I think there's lots of reasons why people might work as freelancers, and I think of them as push factors, right? So, I have no job and I need to feed my family, right? So there's the need there. Then there's what I would call modern workplace blues. I hate my boss. I hate commuting. I hate all these Zoom calls. My talent is not recognized for whatever reason, including pernicious bias and discrimination that goes on. So there are a few push factors, and I'd be interested if people could add any more into the chat there, any ones that they consider as push. And there's pull factors, right? Why would you be pulled into the freelance economy? And I would just echo what Sarah said around autonomy and flexibility. And as someone who designs work, right, the obsession in the pandemic was around where we work. But if you're designing work, it's broader than that. It's the why of work, when you work, how you work, all these factors. So that's a really important aspect of freelancing. And I think another factor I would mention is the rise of technology platforms has made it easier to find opportunities to earn, right? So we've mentioned a couple of providers where you can do graphic design work and writing, but also you can find platforms for dog walking, chefs, and we also have the rise of solopreneurs, people setting up their own businesses online with Shopify and Etsy and others, and a load of creators. There's the top earner on YouTube in 2019 was a 9-year-old kid earning 30 million a year reviewing toys. So there's lots of different ways of earning money these days.
For sure. Now, do we see the freelancing gig economy more as, I guess, a full-time role, that the freelancers are performing, or more as a side hustle, or something that people may do to enhance their incomes and their work on their terms when they feel the need to?
No, I can take that if that's okay. I think in the middle of the pandemic, people started having this, and I use this word a lot, even on my profile on LinkedIn. It's like a paradigm shift in the way people are making choices, right, between work and leisure. And so I feel like, they were considering opportunities, right, that maybe the freelancing might be more full-time. But I think even now it's coming to economic necessity. I mean, the US inflation, for example, I think is like 6% annual, and nominal wages are like at 4%. So people are like having issues, right, keeping up with their bills. There's so much more demand now for additional employment, right, outside of your full-time employment. So I think those are, some of the variables to consider.
Can I just add something really interesting that Sarah said around there's a decision between working and leisure? And boy, that's changed in the internet era, hasn't it? We've got 24/7 streaming quality entertainment, gaming, movies, music, dating, all these kind of things. The internet has really changed that equation, I think. It must be difficult for economists to keep track of that equation, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And one point I will make is a lot of the data that's coming out, at least from the US government, is showing, on caregiving that like more women in every cohort actually are proportionately or disproportionately taking care of people. And so this caregiving responsibility, I think, is driving a lot of females perhaps to go into freelancing. I mean, it's giving them that autonomy, that flexibility. Mm-hmm. It's not just females, obviously, individuals that have caregiving concerns.
And if I could add in a thought there, just on your original question, Warren, I think for a lot of people, the gig economy and opportunities in this space start as maybe a side gig and grow into the main gig. And you're seeing this as it moves into other generations where traditionally, the younger generations were exploring these options. With the pandemic and with other shifts in the way we work, you're seeing Gen X and boomers trying out things in this space and growing into full-time, not necessarily full-time, but their main source of income. So you're seeing more of a shift in that direction.
Yeah, excellent point. And do we see this as more of just a US specific dynamic, or is it a global? Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you asked that. I mean, at Raidency, we actually collect data from a lot of job candidates. And, I was looking at percentage of apply clicks, right? For example, on like gig or part-time or contract. And at least year over year, that's actually gone down just by a little bit, 2%. But I think that also speaks kind of to the overall economy of the world, right? The global economy. It's just, high interest rates, all the central banks, right? They're increasing the interest rates to tame inflation. And because of that, it's, there's a shift in aggregate demand and, companies are collecting less money. There's more anxiety. There's the fear of recession. So that to me is why I think there's been a kind of a decline, at least in that. But I think overall, people in the US, we look at data also from the UK and from India, there's definitely a high demand for these type of opportunities, jobs that have the gig, the part-time, or the contract in them.
And just to add my thoughts in there, this is definitely a global situation. A lot of the pressures that originally moved people towards looking at gig economy, whether it be as a side hustle or as, a full-time situation for them, are universal situations such as the pandemic, which affected us all, and it moved us all towards rethinking the way we work. From some of the numbers I've looked at, the gig economy is globally estimated at about $3.7 trillion economy. And here, working at Deal, I've kind of got a front row seat to see what's going on, and we're enabling people to hire globally, and people are loving that. And we've seen explosive growth, and we've seen our business grow from a startup in 2019 to 15,000 different companies using us by this point in time. And so, some of the numbers I'm looking at, countries where the gig economy has really taken off: United States, the UK, Brazil, Pakistan, Ukraine, Philippines, India, Russia, and many more. So, you're seeing this spread far and wide around the globe, and you're seeing people able to work together in different parts of the globe. No longer do you need to sit next to each other to collaborate together, thanks to technology and other advances. And to answer the other part of your question, it's definitely not just the tech sector that is taking advantage of this economy. We're seeing growth within the public sector, within business services, health, education, manufacturing, construction, and the list goes on. So it's definitely a universal shift and something we're seeing across the board from where I'm sitting, at least.
I think it's a really positive story here, right? So if you think there's about 3.5 billion people in the global workforce, right? About 2 billion of them don't work with a formal job. So somebody's mobile that put me off completely. So 2 billion out of 3.4 billion don't have a formal job, right? So there's a big opportunity to bring people into the global economy with these platforms, gig working, smaller contracts. It's unrealistic to give 2 billion people a formal, well-designed, good quality job. I think, being realistic, it'd be interesting to hear what you think.
And Dan, quick question. So the countries that you mentioned, they are rising on the supply side or the demand side on the gig economy? Or both?
So I would say both. You're seeing certain countries become hotbeds. Like, we see a lot of demand over in Eastern Europe where people are wanting to hire someone who is proficient in coding, for example, or Pakistan has great employees that are working for US companies and vice versa, and all over the place. It's just, people are able to find the best fit talent no matter where they live. So you're seeing great steps forward regardless of where people live, and company could be headquartered here and they want to hire here, and that works out great. And it's something that's new and that's easier than ever to take advantage of.
The one thing I'll point out, I think it's all interesting information. I was actually thinking about broadband access. So in specific countries, obviously, if there's access to to broadband, to internet, right, that infrastructure that's available, then obviously there's going to be more activity, right, in the gig economy. But then in places, right, where you have the talent, but you don't have the infrastructure, there's that disconnect. I was just thinking about that as all of you were talking in terms of just, I wonder if there's data on that. Can I do a correlation coefficient? That's where my mind went. But
very cool. And then thank you. Just to make sure, because we're talking about a bunch of topics that I think that are pretty broad and reaching. So let's just define, the gig economy or freelancing work, whether it's between contracting, gig work, freelancing, piecework, perhaps anything else. Are there any other kind of considerations that are included in this topic?
I think there's all different types of work. I mentioned, even solopreneurs, people running little shops from platforms. One way I look at it is almost like this decentralized workforce, and it includes platform workers, digital nomads, people who earn money from playing games, playborers, they're called, content creators, coaches, live streamers, people who are experts and get paid by the hour for their advice, lawyers, consultants of different types, data laborers, people just doing some data work. Even for freelancers, you get phrases such as slashies. People have got 3 or 4 or 5 different hats. So, it's very hard to define, I think, because there's all these gray areas and overlaps, but it's very diverse.
I suppose we can generalize that as if you don't have a full-time job, full-time boss, probably that's gig work.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. And now moving, beyond, I don't know if you've all, seen the article, a blog post. I'll just share it in the chat. But futuretimeline.net, which is a pretty intriguing site, it really talks about changes going on, by the century, suggests that traditional employment will become obsolete in 2200. So based on the changes in technology and society, et cetera, is this the direction that you think we're headed in? Andy, as the futurist, I'll ask you to kind of lead off, with that.
Well, a lot of the work of the futurist is really just dealing with the here and now, of course. But I think it's useful to look at patterns in history. I don't think we can extrapolate a lovely linear straight line over the next 80 years Because who would have predicted the impact of the internet on industry and society, the impact of the mobile phone on all of these things? This has not been in a straight line at all, has it? In some ways, so we underestimate the impact in the short term, probably, and overestimate it in the longer term. The graphs are difficult. I wrote an article about building a better work without jobs. So I was saying the same thing, that historically we started off working from home in industrialized northern England, where I'm from. People made shoes and dresses and matchboxes at home. Then technology came along and we moved to the factories. And now there's another wave where technology is allowing us to work from home, work remotely. And so there's a lot of factors that are saying that the formal job isn't actually going to be the best way to organize work in the future, which poses questions for society, such as around financial security, taxation, equity. They're big questions for any society. But I think the formal job is unbundling onto platforms. I see the rise of the gig economy, and I won't make a prediction about something in 77 years' time, but I think that's the general trend. Jobs are unbundling. I definitely see that, if that makes sense.
And Sarah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the article may be a little bit over optimistic in terms of all traditional employment being obsolete. That was kind of my first reaction. I think it's also kind of analogous to what we're seeing trending right now. We're in April, right? I mean, I can't believe the year is going like this. And what's trending? It's ChatGPT, right? It's Google Bard. It's trying to figure out, oh my gosh, will this job be automated? Will this job not be automated, right? A lot of these conversations are happening, right, with the internet and so forth. But I think, there's pros, right? These technologies are there, right, to simplify people's tasks. But the cons, it's limiting in terms of the experience that an actual human being will bring. So for example, if I had some law on employment, right, and I pasted that in Google Bard or ChatGPT and it gave me a summary. Okay, great. Now, what do I do with that law? What does it mean in this state or that state? What are the implications? What are the next actions? I mean, I guess maybe I'm too impatient. I don't feel like writing all the commands out. So I'd probably outsource this to a lawyer and get, their experience and their insight. But I think there's still value for people. I think there's industries in the US that I'm thinking about, such as like financial services, right, or professional business services. These tend to be a bit more traditional. I don't see them like drastically overnight, changing themselves. That's going to take a while and maybe beyond my lifetime. But those are my thoughts on that.
Interesting. And we did have a question from Varun that says, without the promise of steady money or steady income, will banks lend us for home loans, I presume auto loans, et cetera, in the future? How does that all change?
If I could make a quick comment on that, I think the future, it's unscripted at this point. And what we're already starting to see is some of the laws shifting. I know there was some major laws that were created in Europe recently around gig economy workers. And you're going to see things change. And as we move into the future, there will be, different governmental changes that will make it easier, I think, for gig economy workers to do some of the things that we've traditionally associated with employees that work within corporations. And those would be things that fall into the categories like getting loans and getting homes and getting health insurance and things like that. So that would be my prediction. Obviously, you never know, but that would be the way I see things going.
Yeah, industries adapt, don't they? So in the city of London, the Uber contract was cancelled by the local government and the trade union got involved in negotiations. So a new role for the trade union, actually, historically. And the solution was that the Uber drivers needed to have some kind of health insurance and some kind of benefits that were provided almost on a daily, weekly basis, so very short term. So the insurance industry got involved and are providing some response to the need of people working as freelancers. It's a really important question because if you've applied for a mortgage or a loan and you don't have 10 years of salary payments and you might have a more inconsistent income, then it's harder to get a loan. We've been there. And so we need to come up with solutions that are a bit more flexible for people. So, yeah.
Interesting. Now, we do have a poll, I think, on this topic, Simi, do you want to post it, please? And
Yes. So, guys, we have a little poll here for you to interact with us and let us know your thoughts on this. Just quickly explaining how this works. We're using the platform Mentimeter. Not sure if you heard about it. You can point your cameras to this QR code. This is the first question already. Or you can click the link that I just shared on the chat. And just about these changes we are predicting on the gig work, do you agree with this suggestion that all the traditional employment will become obsolete? What do you think about it? So let us know your thoughts there. Paul will be here. We will have a few more questions for you to let us know your opinion. But so far we have this one. So yeah, you can just point your camera here to this QR code or use the link and let us know. And then we will check later too.
Okay, cool.
Right?
Thanks.
Right now, I will add this here to the corner of the stage, but then we will revisit it later.
Great. Okay. So now, Dan, how do you think working remotely has really affected freelancing?
I think it's been a huge driver of the shift that we've seen. I think as you saw in the years leading up to 2020, there was already a shift that was starting to happen gradually, where people were looking at these gig opportunities and getting interested in exploring more flexible workplace situations, both from the employee side and from the employer side. But then the pandemic hits, and it's a major shift. It's an overnight shift where there's so much work from home going on. People are realizing that it's possible to work from home. People are also spending time at home, reassessing everything they do, and they're having a chance to sit down and say, hey, is this job really what I want to do? Maybe I want to find something that's more flexible. Maybe I want to be my own boss. Maybe I want to start something myself. Maybe I want to check out these new platforms and platforms that we saw like Fiverr and Upwork and TaskRabbit, Hire. They're getting in there and they're trying new things. Maybe they're throwing themselves in with both feet. Maybe they're just doing it on the side. But in addition to the gig jobs that have been there for a long time, like driving for Uber or something like that, now you're getting these gig jobs that you can do in far-flung locations. And I touched on it a little bit earlier, but people in one side of the world working for a company on the other side of the world, and they communicate seamlessly, and it works. And I'm seeing that firsthand at Deal. I work with colleagues all around the world. I work with partnerships all around the world, and remote work has really enabled that, and it's opened up so many more opportunities. So, from some of the numbers I'm looking at, the gig economy ballooned at least 30% during the pandemic, and it's just showing no signs of stopping at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And then as a follow-on to that, from an employer perspective, a couple of questions. What are the challenges in managing this now very more diverse, fluid, transient workforce that's not only remote in multiple countries, but also could be here today and then they leave after a couple of weeks and then come back on? Well, let's just stop there before I just load on with the question. So Dan, yeah,
definitely. So it does present, new great upsides and positive pieces and also new challenges. And so as you're managing company that's made up of people that are located in different locations and maybe they're not, full-time employees, maybe they're just going to be there for accomplishing a certain project and then they're going to move on. You got to be able that you have the right tools so that you can collaborate. You got to be able to keep people involved. Something that can be helpful is using performance management tools out there. I've worked with a lot of groups like 15Five and Lattice and Culture Amp who help you on organizing your goal setting, help you on collaborating and understanding objectives so that everybody can be staying on the same page and working towards the same things. So I think that it's important to provide clarity in goals and direction so that teams can collaborate together. And obviously, all situations are going to be different. If somebody's an Uber driver, it's going to be a little bit different than collaborating a full marketing team together on putting together a marketing project. So I think clarity and understanding and purpose and direction and goals and what you want from each person and being sure to be be open. And, it's been talked about ad nauseum, but like in-person conversations around the water cooler aren't happening. So make sure that you have a way to discuss these things, whether it's using an online tool, whether it's getting together on meetings and virtually, and just establishing trust and building understanding, alignment on the goals are some of the things that need to happen so that you know what you're trying to do, how you're trying to have your team help you do it.
Well said. And as a follow-on to that, do you think employee benefits or needs change, in this environment? And what do the employees, want out of it?
Yeah, definitely. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's a huge issue of benefits and healthcare and things like that needs to be solved, and it's already being worked on. Those wheels are in process, and I do have confidence that it will be something that's going to come to light and it's going to be a focus. But one thing that draws people to companies is the benefits and being able to rely on that company for things like healthcare. And so as that gets better and there becomes more available options for gig workers, it's going to become even more and more attractive. So it's something that it needs to be looked at and that we're working on. But I would say there's still progress and more to come there.
Sure. Andy, any thoughts?
Just if you're a team manager or a CHRO, you need to think about employer brand. Why should somebody work for your company really broadly now? It's not just about filling a vacancy. It's attracting talented freelancers, independents, contractors, having access to this pool of talent to help you design your work. So your employer brand is more than just employees, it's contractors. So how do you make working with you as attractive as possible? The obvious question, Dan's touched on it, is pay rates, obviously, but it's more than that. In a competitive market where there's similar pay rates, it needs to be an enjoyable experience. The onboarding needs to be smooth. Again, Dan mentioned the technology for doing that. That's important. And I would say to employers, they should really realize that the boundaries between different categories of workers are becoming less. So they need to include their contractors and freelancers in team building, that kind of thing, in social activities, to include these contractors, because they could be coming back to you many times over many years. There'll be more churn going on. So just a couple of thoughts there for managing this process.
Can I add something to that? Oh, sorry, Warren.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Agree with Andy, agree with Dan. I was just thinking about, for me, I think it's just looking at the employers that we work with, but it's incumbent on firm leadership, I believe, to think about employees who are different and not just about like the racial and ethnic, like the obvious physical attributes of people or maybe their background or their religion or so forth. But it's also about mental clarity in terms of like neurodiversity. So there's a lot of employees that are high achieving. They might have ADHD, but a traditional employer or a recruiter or a manager might not be trained to understand, how a neurodiverse employee thinks and what they're motivated by. And so I think it's imperative to consider people, right, from all different angles. It's not just their resume and their skills, but really have those conversations and personalize it. And, it sounds costly in the beginning, but it's more costly than to go out there and keep recruiting people and then lose people. I mean, there's the replacement cost. So I tie it back to economics always, right? But like, that's kind of how I look at that.
And I love what you're saying there, Sarah. And also, I think it's important for companies to look at the factors that are driving people towards gig work and try and make changes within, their full-time employees, because, as we talked about, people want to be able to be their own boss. They want to be able to do meaningful work. They want to be able to have work-life balance. They want to, not be in a situation where they're hating their job. And so that's why they're going to these gig jobs, because it offers them freedom and flexibility. It offers them the ability to make their own schedule. And so if you can incorporate some of those things into your company, not only are you going to attract more gig workers, but you're going to make your full-time employees happier and just looking at what's going on there.
Right. And then, as you guys are all saying, as if, building out a company's culture wasn't challenging enough, certainly now with all of these diverse constituencies and needs, it's even more not only impactful, but difficult to really, achieve.
And another thing that I'm just observing and noticing is that, many times the companies think that, okay, we have gig workers, so we don't have to worry about some of these things. But that's not the case, right? You have to incorporate some of these, ideas or thoughts that are already part of, the culture of the full-time employees, right? Like all these things about, activities you do with them to kind of make sure that they are motivated, they are connected, they are, inspired to, kind of like go an extra mile. And many times companies might think that, oh, now that I'm giving it to contractors or freelancers, I don't have to worry about those. That's not the case. They should be equally, especially the HR team should be equally, be concerned, and all of these topics should be on their radars about the culture beyond your full-time employees.
Definitely. Yeah. And now let's look at the opposite, but the employee perspective, right? How does one flourish, without a permanent job, and change their mindset to a more of a freelance or gig mentality? Andy, what do you think?
I think my first tip is an old one. It's to nurture your networks. We've always told from when we're at school to look after your network, to build communities. I think that's even more important as a freelancer, because you're constantly looking for the next gig, the next contract, and you're going to be changing more often. I've spoken at conferences about a subject, and people seriously will get back to you 5 years later and said, oh, you said something about AI. I'm really interested in that now, So it's a long-term game. Plant some seeds. I think that's really important. And give something back to the community. Build your social media profile professionally. And I think that's a good way of contributing and being seen to contribute. I think that's useful. I think my other tip is think like a business. So we have to get out of the mindset of providing our labor for money. Actually, we run a business. We need to make a profit at the end of the year. So think a little bit about your sales pipeline, where the next contract is coming from, and the one after that, and next year, and the year after. Think about your profit margins for the kind of work you do, when to use subcontractors, this kind of thing. What are your service lines? So think like a small business. And then I would say, think about supply and demand. So you're good at graphic design, but so are millions of people. You're good at coding. You need to think about the competition and maybe develop a niche. Okay, your graphic design in retail or something like that, so people know you in that industry. So I think the main thing there is to think a little strategically and tactically and think like a business.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with what you're saying there, Andy. And just to add a few other thoughts, thinking like a business, you're your own boss now. If you're 2 feet into the gig economy, so you got to hold yourself accountable, because you're no longer reporting up to a manager. You are the manager. You're the one who's going to set those goals. You're going to be the one who's going to be responsible for, checking in on the goals, seeing where you are, seeing how you're accomplishing them. What do you need to change? Where do you need to pivot to get closer to those goals? Make sure you're keeping track of the trends, following trends, staying ahead of things. Be open to new ideas. Be open to looking at, where you can jump in and you can make an impact, where you can find that niche, like Andy was talking. Just make sure you're disciplined. Make sure that you're willing to hustle, that you're willing to invest in yourself, because you're the one who's going to be creating the results. So don't be afraid to up-level your skills, take courses, learn more, do self-learning. There's so many different opportunities out there, outside of just a traditional university degree, where you can build new skills and you can get new things. So since you're the boss, you're the employee, you're the whole company, invest in yourself, get yourself even better. The things that will help you succeed: perseverance, being focused, the desire to progress, continue learning, kind of an adventurous spirit, being willing to try new things, take on new opportunities. And those are the things that I think will help you get into that mindset.
Yeah, great advice. And obviously, these soft skills that you guys are describing, right, become even more important than the core skills or hard skills that we think, oh, I want to be the best developer or best creative. I also need to really focus on me and my company as such.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then to that point, with all of these different gigs that we have and different skills, how do you envision, the resume, migrating and transitioning?
The resume is about 500 years old. Leonardo da Vinci was the first known person to apply for a job as a military engineer, and we're still using it. And, it still has unverified credentials, in other words, white lies on them, right? And we're still using it. It's a terrible document. So I think there's a new generation of technology that's developing to keep an eye out for, where you actually control your own verifiable profile. You choose which platforms you engage with, and it puts a bit more trust into the job market. I'd watch out for those new resumes. Some of them use blockchain technology, where different nodes on a network, for example, universities, can actually validate the authenticity of someone having a degree, for example. And the Velocity Foundation is a non-profit that has all these staffing and recruitment agencies are developing standards for these profiles. I don't think it would be branded with either of those. It would just be the way we hire in the future. But think of it as lifelong learning and building up your skills and being able to show and demonstrate that you've got those skills. Keep hold of the proof, if you know what I mean. So I think it's changing. I'd keep an eye on it.
Just to add to what Andy's saying there, the resume has been around forever, and I don't see it going completely away. At least it'll be there in some form. But I do think the gig economy presents an opportunity to drive your resume in the direction where you want to go, maybe a little bit more direct. So if you can make a plan and make a goal and see yourself where you want to be, you can use these gig jobs to get yourself there and maybe get yourself there faster, because you can tailor the jobs you're taking and the course you're taking, and you can pilot it towards where you want to be. So I think it's an opportunity to put together a unique resume and take on jobs that are going to put you in a place closer to where you want to be. So you're less in that situation where you're in a corporate job that you dislike and you don't foresee a future in it, and you don't foresee it taking you in a place you want to go. With the gig, job, you're able to shift what you're doing and put it more towards places that are going to be more fulfilling and put you more towards your goals. But what I will say is, in a situation where you are your own boss, there is also a risk of kind of blowing wherever the wind takes you. And so I would encourage people to kind of set a plan. It's like that old quote, by failing to plan, you plan to fail. So make a plan and get yourself, steps, make yourself goals that are going to put you moving towards the place you want to be. So you're building the resume that you want to have, and it will be a unique resume, and it will be one that's going to serve you. So that's just kind of my 2 cents on the resume and where that goes and what that looks like.
Great. Excellent. Great advice. Thank you. Now, moving into the now, I guess, over the last several months, there's certainly been a lot of high profile, layoffs, particularly from these big tech behemoths out there. I think I saw, over 200,000 people, I think, have been laid off in tech just from a lot of these leaders. So Sarah, do you see this current trends accelerating, freelancing and gig work?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it's not just the U.S. economy. I think it's the global economy. It's bracing for impact. I mean, we had this banking crisis happen, so people are like, "Oh God, is this 2008?" Like that's given more anxiety, and it's like it's self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't want this to happen if you keep thinking of it. So I'll be positive today, right? But a lot of these people that are experiencing the layoffs, especially if they're maybe in non-tech roles, they have skills, right? The hard skills, the soft skills, those are transferable. It's not all negative. There's still industries, right, that are always hiring, whether it be full-time roles, part-time roles, the gig roles and the freelancing. But I think my comments kind of piggyback on the last question, where it's like, how do you distinguish yourself, right? To Andy's point, what makes you so special? To Dan's point, the training, the skills. But I think it's also about talking to people about what you did and how those actions made an impact. The impact part of it is the storytelling. And that's where, even if you're an accountant, I'm just making this up, you can be a storyteller. You can make numbers fun. I'm an economist. I love economics, but partly probably because I put the passion in it. It's about how you tell your story. And I think we'll see a rise, in my opinion, in freelancing as people are just, stepping back, reevaluating their life choices, right? Thinking about leisure versus work, but also culture, the brand of the employer, all the main points that my distinguished panelists touched upon. But I think I would like to end it on this, though. When I look at the data in the US, specifically the people that are not in the labor force, the three issues outside of retirement is caregiving, concerns around healthcare, getting COVID, or not wanting to work. That population of not wanting to work, what's driving that, right? Like, do they want to be freelancers? Is there some barrier? And I can't answer that question on behalf of the US Census Bureau because they didn't follow up. That's me right there, picking apart some of the government data. But, those are some of the thoughts that come to me.
Well said. Andy, Dan, any thoughts on this?
It's very complex, as Sarah indicated, in the global economy. It's not just the tech companies, it's supply and demand and what's going on around the world. And I think in these environments, maybe don't want to make an expensive long-term commitment of hiring an employee. So freelancing, contracting becomes more attractive. Also, industries are rapidly changing with all sorts of factors. And if you're planning a project, you probably want teams of contractors with fixed start and end dates that you can control the budget more easily with something that is a bit of a pilot or an experiment. Gives more flexibility to employers. So I definitely see the trend continuing.
Just to add on to what Andy's saying there, I think with layoffs and economic uncertainty, everybody, at least most people have a desire to find security and to find, something that they feel confident in, and picking up more than one source of income is certainly something that does that for you, so that if one thing drops off, at least you've got this other thing going on over here. And that's exactly what freelancing or solopreneur or something on the side can do for you. And so I think that's pushing more people towards this gig economy, is like, hey, I've got my mainstream job, but if anything were to happen to it, this freelancing I'm doing over here is something that can keep me afloat until I find something to fill in my main job. Or I can, if my main job drops off, I can balloon my side gig into a full-time gig, pour more into that. I think the effect is giving people more interest to look at it, looking at more opportunities for themselves. So yeah, I do think there's a huge effect, economic uncertainties, layoffs that drive people to look into this and want to participate in it.
Definitely focus around diversification and portfolio management of your own skills, right? And networks, et cetera. And then I'll just throw out the last question to the panel and then open it up to any questions from the audience around work relationships. Oh, we got a poll. Thanks, Timmy. Sorry,
I was on mute. I was just wanted to, since we were talking about this, I want to know from our audience, just put the link here again. You can go there and let us know what you think about if the companies need to apply these changes on their company culture, not only on the work itself, but on their cultures. And then we will go back to this just to check your answers later. Sorry for the interruption. Let's go back.
No problem. That's fine. So then we see some votes coming in. Cool. And last question around work relationships. What do you all think about, does freelancing really impact trust in the workplace?
I'd love to make a just initial comment here. I think the accountability when you're a freelancer is really on yourself. And so it's up to you to establish if you're trustworthy, because if you're working on just a contract basis or a short-term basis, are you going to be asked to come back? Are you going to be able to get the next job? Are you going to be able to do what you have to do? So there's an impact on trust. And I think you figure out really, really quickly if somebody's trustworthy, because after one experience with them, you're making a decision on if you're going to use this person again, if you're going to do business with this person again. So it's on you. Once again, you're your own boss, you're your own manager, you're the one who's accountable to yourself. And if you can't produce what you say you're going to produce, then you're probably not going to get the next job. So I think there's an impact there. And I think it kind of fast tracks that idea of, is there trust here or is there not?
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
I think this is a great question, because the traditional relationship between the employer and the employee that we built up in the 20th century is pretty much dead. And I think we need to rebuild these trust relationships between employers and workers. And I think that very much includes these kind of freelance contracts.
I think it also might matter if the role is either in person or remote. I mean, there's a lot of literature and studies, right, that are going on where management might think that remote work, those employees can't be trusted as much, or that's why there's this whole pull come back to the office, at least in the US, right? So there's that. But then to Dan, what he said earlier, I agree. It's like the deliverable that you're producing. If you're consistent, it's high quality. I mean, that's basically your reputation. I mean, if you're a smart freelancer, you'll think about that, right? Before you maybe go to Starbucks and waste 3 hours drinking a cafe mocha. I mean, maybe you should get that Excel file done, right? So just kind of being practical about it. I don't know who takes 3 hours to drink a mocha, but anyway.
Cool. Great answers. Thank you. Let's open it up to the audience and see any questions that you may have. Suppose, you can type it into the chat, or, we could even bring you up to the stage.
Yeah, let us know. In case you want to open your mic and talk to us, we can add you to the stage, or you can add your question or comment anything to the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
So while we are waiting for that, one thing I would bring it up, I think you guys must have seen that, but one of the categories where we are seeing freelancing being more popular is also, especially in the tech industry, people who are about to retire in a few years, right? They find it a great way to kind of they cannot completely retire, right? So they have found this amazing way to kind of be their own boss and kind of decide how many hours they want to put per day into the work instead of a full-time job with those kind of deadlines, right? So now they might decide, okay, I just want to put 3 or 4 hours or maybe 6 hours a day and through freelancing, that options are opening up for them. And
Mm-hmm.
especially, in India, we have seen that trend happening a lot with the kind of work that we are doing in interview as a service. And some of my friends, in fact, who are, debating about what to do next, because now, there's a good 20 years of work experience under their belt, and now they don't want to quite work full time. And we were brainstorming, and one of the things that came up out of it is, okay, online coaching and interviewing and those kind of work will give them good enough money and the lifestyle that they can also enjoy, right? So that trend was picking up quite well in India, and those are some of the best gig workers that we have found for our solutions that we provide.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mehul. Well, I think, we're pretty much at the top of the hour. Doesn't seem like we have any more questions. So with that, I think we'll here we go. We got Grace. I'll read the question. Thank you, Grace. Do you feel the gig economy is tomorrow's workforce, meaning less traditional workers, and the workforce will be gig going forward? I often see that people will want to be multi-employed.
If I could comment on that real briefly, I think the future often lies somewhere in the middle. I think it's hard to say an absolute, all companies traditional will be dead and everyone will be gig. I think it probably falls in the middle where gig finds a sweet spot. People, certainly embrace this and it rises to prominence, but I do think that there will always be a place for people who they want to be part of the company and they want to go full time. They want to, be close to that 8 to 5. But I do think that this is here to stay. This is going to be very prominent in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Somewhere in the middle. It's almost like Roger's adoption curve of technology. We're not saturated. It's like early adoption right now. If you can follow my S curve, if that makes sense.
And then as a follow-up from Varun, will we see gig employees unionizing like trade unions? I know we've seen some of that with Uber drivers and things like that. So is that the trend that we'll see, more of down the road?
I think we're beginning to see it. There's examples of delivery drivers in Jakarta working off a platform, getting together on WhatsApp groups to organize insurance, fixing cars and bikes, this kind of thing. And they're getting together and then working with their employer, if you like, to make improved conditions. It's kind of what happened in the Industrial Revolution. So I think we're actually going to see these brokers, and we might see digital freelance versions of cooperatives and guilds and things like that that are delivered from platforms. It's certainly possible.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, with that, I think it's now noon here on the East Coast. I'd like to thank the audience for joining us, and Sarah, Andy, and Dan, thank you so much for providing your insights, your wisdom, and guidance in this area. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Many thanks, guys. Thank you for the ones who answered our poll. I know that most of you need to drop now, but just in case, you can stay for 3 more seconds. So for the first question, most of respondents said that it may lose its power, but not so drastically, regarding that statement of the traditional employment becoming obsolete. Thank you for answering. Then regarding adopting drastic changes in the company's culture, 6 people said a yes and 2 said no. So majority agreed, yeah, and some didn't. And we had also regarding the remote work in the past. So most of the people said that the shift was already coming and it would be inevitable in any way. And some people also agree that if the pandemic limitations had not existed, no drastic changes would have been seen. So yeah, basically that's it. Thank you again for everyone who participated and joined today. Thank you again to our speakers, and also to Warren and Mehul for joining us. And yeah, have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Dan, Andy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.